I kept the key I shouldn't have kept. It was a small thing, brass the color of old candlelight, engraved with a square and compass so worn it had softened to an outline. I told myself I held on to it because I had earned it, because I had crossed the threshold and recited the oaths and felt the blindfold lift with tears in my eyes. But the truth was simpler. I kept it because I didn't trust what the lodge did with doors, and something in me needed proof that a door could still open when I decided, not when it decided for me. The lodge breathed differently after midnight. During public nights and rehearsed degrees, it felt like any quiet hall, polished wood, framed symbols that looked respectable in their distance. After midnight, the air had weight. Dust paused in the beams like it was listening. The floorboards gave off a familiar warmth, as if the building remembered every foot that had learned to step lightly. I had been told to leave by 11. I offered to lock up. Brother Lucas smiled without smiling and patted my shoulder, as if he could feel the key beneath my coat. I went out into the September chill and waited around the corner until I heard the last car pull away. I told myself it was just a walk-through, a private pilgrimage through rooms that had remade me. I traced the tiled pavement, the checkerboard of light and dark that had once made me feel balanced and now made me feel questioned. I paused beneath the east. The master's chair was draped, the gavel laid diagonally as if someone had interrupted a sentence. The square and compass on the wall caught my flashlight and returned a dull, tired gleam. The altar in the center was cleaner than any church I'd known growing up, edges without dust, a Bible opened not to a verse, but to a fold, a crease worn by hands that turned the same page, and then turned it back, as if to leave a gate ajar. The deeper doors were locked. I knew they would be. That was what the little brass key was for. Brother Lucas had called it an honorific, something traditional, symbolic, an antique. I had thanked him and pocketed it, and the weight of it had made my thoughts heavier all week. I told the lock the truth of me in a single hesitant click. The corridor beyond smelled like resin and cold stone. The lodge had a basement, of course, but this hallway felt older than that word. The walls weren't finished. Behind the plaster and paint was a kind of rough masonry that shed a sandy whisper when I ran my fingertips along it. Someone had lined the path with small, shallow bowls of hardened wax, their wicks pinched flat. Matches rested in a porcelain dish with blue-glazed ivy, waiting. I shouldn't have lit them. I did. Each wick woke into a trembling halo, and the corridor accepted the light without letting it travel far, as if the dark were an organ that digested brightness slowly. No one had told me about the door with the 7 hinges. It was not ornate. The wood was plain, sober, as if a carpenter had been sworn to humility. But 7 hinges felt like a joke that had changed its mind and become serious. The key fit before I could doubt it. The hinges moved with a damp sound, as if they had been oiled with something that remembered palms. The room was circular and small enough to be a whisper. The floor abandoned the tidy checkerboard and offered a different geometry, a ring divided into arcs by faint chalk lines that clung stubbornly to the grain. Symbols I recognized, others I didn't, arranged with a patience that made me feel late. At the center stood a pedestal only as high as my knee, stone instead of wood, its surface dark with a sheen that could have been oil or use. On the walls, 6 plaques described positions a man could hold without understanding who had placed him there. The 7th space was blank, a rectangle of pale silence framed by nail holes. I heard the first footstep at the same moment the candle nearest the door guttered for lack of attention. A soft soul, a pause, another, measured like a phrase. I lowered my light and cupped the flame, and in that heart-s beat of darkness I recognized a smell I had failed to name for months. Not incense, not something chemical, the mineral scent of quarried rock after rain, basements, subway stations, old tunnels. I had told myself it was the glue in the carpet or the wax on the chairs. It wasn't. It was something that rose from beneath us when it was called. I did not run. That's the part I remember most clearly. I did not run because it would have felt like breaking an oath, and fear can be a very obedient brother. The footsteps multiplied into a quiet procession, and then the door opened without a key. Robes only make men look like they agree with each other. In the light, they could have been accountants, teachers, the man who lifted my suitcase onto the train last month. But in the ring, dressed in black, trimmed with a thread of gold that caught the flame and held it like a promise, they were something else entirely. Their faces were not hidden. That would have been easier. They let me see them, and in that allowance, I understood hierarchy in a way lectures never truly teach. One stood at the east, the place of rising, and the others took their stations around the circle with familiarity that made the room feel practiced. No one addressed me. No one asked why I was there. Their ignoring me was not dismissal, but a kind of acceptance, as if I had stepped into a story that could accommodate me without changing a line. The one at the east placed a small, flat object on the central stone. Not a book, a plate, perhaps. It had the glint of something polished by generation rather than cloth. Their voices didn't chant. They conversed with a stillness that moved. Words I recognized, stripped of ornament, arranged like scaffolding around an unseen shape. The geometry on the floor began to make interior sense, not as mysticism, but as instruction. The arcs mapped patience. The gap at the seventh plaque mapped hunger. The object on the pedestal, whatever it was, seemed to be waiting for weight. When I realized they were not summoning anything but measuring it, my mouth went dry. The work, they called it in lessons, and the instructors smiled into the phrase as if it were a private joke about being better men. The work, underneath, meant alignment. The work meant discovering how to lay your thought along a line that had been there before you learned to think. The work meant that a building does not begin with a brick. It begins with what the ground will tolerate. There are sounds the body remembers and refuses to forget. One of them is a chisel striking stone inside a room that does not contain a chisel. The first report was distant and absolute, as if it were happening beneath our feet and far away in the same instant. Dust drifted from a seam in the wall and wrote a momentary script in the candlelight. No one flinched. A second strike followed the first with the certainty of answer. A third made the floor feel like a drumhead. I had the irrational thought that if I placed my ear to the chalk ring, I would hear the earth speaking back in knocks. The man at the east lifted his hand, and the knocks stopped. The silence did not follow. It arrived, like a person who had been waiting in the hall and now entered. He turned the plate on the pedestal a quarter turn. The geometry on the floor took a breath. Something aligned. Nothing dramatic, no wind, no quake. Just the deep, humbling sensation of a plumb line finding straightness after a long, patient search. I understood then, or thought I did, why certain doors required 7 hinges. Not to keep us out, but to keep what we adjusted from collapsing under the weight of our carelessness. We were not conjuring, we were calibrating. And then I felt the noticing. It began like the moment you realize a painting's eyes follow you across a room. Not judgment, not welcome. Appraisal. The space above the pedestal thickened, the way heat above a road wavers into visible uncertainty. The gold threads on the robes burned without fire. The men did not look at me, but something else did, with the patience of stone that has learned to wait longer than men can live. I had kept a key I shouldn't have kept. The door had opened. The work had revealed itself not as a mystery to be solved, but as a law to be obeyed. And I knew, with the clarity of cold water, that what I had seen would not let me return to the tidy checkerboard of the lodge and pretend they were merely squares. I also knew Brother Lucas had known I would come. When the ceremony ended, If ceremony is the right word, the men filed out with the same measured hush they had entered with. The East was the last to leave. His gaze passed the blank seventh plaque, as if measuring its hunger. The door did not close all the way. I was left with the candle stubs, the faint chalk, and the sense that the room was still correcting itself by degrees. I blew out the nearest wick. The dark gathered me like a hood. On the way back through the corridor, I noticed the porcelain dish again. The matchbox, blue ivy, the small civilian mercy of it. I should have replaced the matches I'd struck. I didn't. I pressed the key flat against my palm until it made a half-moon scar that stayed for hours. One more mark I couldn't explain to anyone who still believed walls are only what they seem. I did not sleep when I got home. I set the key on the table and watched the room hesitate around it. Somewhere beneath the city, stone continued its slow conversation. Chisels speaking to plumb lines, the earth answering at a frequency lower than guilt. I wasn't meant to see it, that is what they would say, but the truth is that I was meant to be seen by it. I tried to return to normal life. The next morning I woke to sunlight, the sound of traffic and the smell of burnt coffee. But the light seemed off, not brighter or dimmer, just angled wrong. The lines of the window frame felt misaligned with the world outside, like the geometry of my apartment had shifted by a fraction. I measured the table with my hand, 1, 2, 3, and each pass gave a slightly different distance. It wasn't madness, it was calibration. I went to work, made small talk and said nothing, but every time I blinked, I saw the faint shimmer that had hovered above the pedestal. Not a vision, not a ghost, just a reminder, the way a chisel's echo lingers in the mind long after silence returns. That night, when I washed my hands, I noticed the half-moon scar from the key had darkened. Not a bruise, deeper, as if the mark had been absorbed. The key still lay on my table, catching no light at all. 3 days passed before I heard from Brother Lucas. His message came on a folded card, hand-delivered and unsigned. The handwriting was meticulous, straight lines, uniform spacing, not a trace of emotion. Your attendance is required. Friday, 11:33 p.m. Do not bring the key. The work continues. I told myself not to go. I repeated that until it lost meaning. Friday came. I drove without realizing I had started the car. The lodge was quiet, its windows dark, no cars outside, but the front door was unlocked. The tiled floor greeted me with that familiar duality, black and white squares reflecting candlelight that wasn't there. I could smell wax, faint but recent. Downstairs, where I'd gone before, the corridor was already lit. The wax bowls glowed like a procession waiting for feet. When I reached the door with the 7 hinges, it was already open. The same men stood in their stations, faces serene, robes immaculate. But the circle was different now. The chalk lines had deepened into grooves carved into the wood itself, filled with a thin, dark resin that caught the flame like still water. The pedestal remained at the center, though its surface had changed. The stone had cracked slightly, a hairline fracture running across it like a pulse line. Brother Lucas stood at the east this time. He didn't look surprised to see me. "Once seen," he said softly, "it cannot be unseen. The geometry remembers." He beckoned me forward, not as an intruder but as a participant. I hesitated at the ring's edge. The groove hummed faintly, as if a tuning fork lay beneath the floor. "There is no punishment," Lucas said, "only alignment." I stepped over. He handed me an object wrapped in linen, small, square, warm. When I unfolded the cloth, I saw a wooden cube engraved with symbols I recognized from older rituals. The compass, the square, the letter G, but between them, faintly burned, was another mark I had never seen, a spiral intersected by 3 lines. "Do you know what this is?" Lucas asked. I shook my head. "The unfinished degree," he said, "the one no Mason claims to teach." The others began to murmur in rhythm, not words, not chant, but the measured breathing of men whose hearts beat in unison. The candles dimmed as if responding. Lucas continued, voice calm and deliberate. We build above ground to mirror what lies below. The ritual you witnessed was the 7th alignment. Tonight, you will complete it. He took the cube and placed it on the pedestal. The fracture in the stone widened slightly, releasing a faint breath of cold air. The flames bent toward it. Touch it, Lucas said. I hesitated. The cube seemed to hum, not audibly but beneath the skin. When I reached out, the warmth surged through my hand, like static and memory. I saw for an instant what lay beneath the lodge. Not rooms, not tunnels, but something like architecture without walls. Patterns of light that moved as though being drawn by unseen instruments. I saw men across centuries performing the same gestures, aligning invisible structures that shaped the world above. Then the vision shifted. I saw myself among them. I pulled my hand away. The hum continued. The air thickened. The chalk grooves began to glow faintly red, pulsing to an unseen rhythm. Lucas's voice came through the haze. The work recognizes those who bear witness. You've already been measured. The lodge doesn't expel what it has calibrated. The other brothers stepped closer. Their faces showed no malice, no joy, just the calm certainty of craftsmen completing a familiar task. Do not fear, Lucas said. Every builder must learn the plan beneath the stone. He lifted a small mallet, not ceremonial but real, iron-headed and worn smooth by use. Repeat after me. I can't recall the words exactly. They weren't English. They weren't language, not as I knew it. Each syllable felt like striking a note on some ancient instrument. As I spoke them, I felt the geometry shift again. Not around me this time, but inside me. My thoughts aligned into patterns not entirely my own. My heartbeat slowed until it matched the rhythm of the glowing floor. When the final word left my mouth, the light extinguished. Total darkness, a silence so complete I could hear the movement of my own blood. Then 3 knocks, the same deep, resonant sound from before, but this time it came from within the pedestal. Something was beneath it, or perhaps through it. Lucas whispered, "It's awake." A cold draft spiraled upward, twisting the candle smoke into a perfect column before vanishing into the ceiling. The brothers bowed their heads. I tried to follow, but my knees failed. The room seemed to tilt, or maybe I did. For a moment, I was certain I could see through the floor, shapes moving below, massive and slow, shifting in precise, deliberate harmony. Then everything returned, the light, the warmth, the silence. The groove markings faded to black resin again. Lucas placed a hand on my shoulder. "The measurement is complete," he said. "Now you belong to the line beneath." They left me there as the candles burned low. When I finally stood, the fracture in the stone had sealed itself. Only the faint spiral mark remained, still warm to the touch. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember sleeping. I only remember waking before dawn and realizing that my apartment had changed again. Subtly, impossibly. The wall behind my desk had shifted by a few inches, enough to throw off the symmetry of the room. When I pressed my ear to it, I thought I heard stone breathing. By the next evening, the mark on my palm had darkened further, deep as ink. And when I turned off the lights, I could see it faintly glowing, the same color as the grooves in the lodge floor. It pulsed once, twice, in time with my heart. That's when I realized, whatever the ritual had calibrated that night, it wasn't just the lodge, it was me. 3 nights after the second ritual, the humming began. At first I thought it was an electrical fault, a low vibration coming from somewhere beneath the floorboards like an old pipe or a forgotten machine. But when I cut the power to the apartment, it continued, a steady, measured rhythm. 4 beats, then silence. 4 beats again, the same pattern I had felt in the lodge floor. I tried to drown it out with music, with the television, with noise, but the hum wasn't in the air, it was inside the walls, and sometimes when I pressed my ear close, it shifted, responded, matched my breathing. By the second night, I stopped trying to sleep. When dawn came, I went to the bathroom and found the mirror fogged despite the cold air. Written in the condensation were 3 words: faint, finger-traced. Keep alignment true. I wiped it away. The letters returned an hour later. I wanted to believe I was losing my mind, that what I had seen in the lodge had infected my memory, not my surroundings. But the mark on my palm pulsed whenever I lied to myself. The glow beneath the skin answered truth like a heartbeat beneath confession. At work, I noticed other signs. Perfect symmetry where it shouldn't exist, cracks in the ceiling forming faint triangles, office lights flickering in a pattern that mirrored the same 4-beat rhythm. Once, in the reflection of a window, I saw the faint outline of the spiral, the same one burned into the cube, hovering just above my shoulder. When I turned, nothing was there. I began to understand what Lucas meant when he said, "Now you belong to the line beneath." The alignment wasn't a secret ceremony, it was a contagion. On the 5th night, I woke to the sound of my front door unlocking from the inside. The deadbolt turned slowly, deliberately. I stood in the dark, frozen, listening as the hinges sighed open. Someone, or something, stepped into the apartment. No footsteps, just the faint displacement of air. When I flicked on the light, the door was closed. But there, on the table beside the brass key, lay a folded sheet of parchment, the same kind the lodge used for initiations, the same red wax seal pressed with the number 33 Digger, except this time the wax had already cracked, as if the seal itself had opened before I touched it. Inside, written in that same measured handwriting, were the words, "The 7th circle is not a place. It is an echo waiting for its builder. You have begun construction. Do not resist the geometry." Beneath it was a small black thread, looped in a perfect triangle. I didn't understand it then. I do now. The next day, the walls began to shift again, not visibly, but subtly enough to make me question every object's position. My desk angled 2 degrees off center. My books leaned toward an unseen axis. Even shadows obeyed a new pattern, slanting where no light source could justify it. It felt as though my apartment had been folded into a blueprint that was being redrawn from within. When I stepped into the hallway, I realized it wasn't just my home. The entire building hummed. People passed me in the stairwell, ordinary tenants with groceries and dogs and children. None of them seemed to hear it, but their footsteps fell into that same rhythm. 4 steps, pause, 4 steps again. When I reached the lobby, I saw a man I'd never met, standing perfectly still beside the mailboxes, staring at the ceiling. He turned to me and smiled, the kind of smile that acknowledges recognition before memory. "You've started," he said quietly. "I can tell." Before I could reply, he left through the side door without checking his mail. That evening, I called Brother Lucas. He answered on the first ring. "You weren't supposed to leave it," he said. "Leave what?" "The key. It still carries your measure." I told him about the hum, the walls, the writing in the mirror. He didn't sound surprised. "It's aligning through you now. Don't fight it." "What is it?" "The foundation," he said simply. "Every lodge rests upon another, not of stone, but of thought. Every initiate adds a layer. The geometry corrects us all, one by one, until the pattern is complete." Complete for what? For return. The call ended before I could ask what he meant. Over the next week, I stopped leaving the apartment. Sleep became impossible. Whenever I closed my eyes, I saw diagrams. Impossible blueprints drawn in light, shifting constantly, as if trying to find their true form. I began sketching them just to get them out of my head. Circles divided by lines that never met, triangles nested within cubes, staircases folding into themselves. When I pinned one to the wall, the hum softened for a while. It was like feeding a machine the data it demanded. but each drawing I completed felt less like my creation and more like transcription. And then the door opened again, not with sound, with permission. The air changed, warm like candlelight. My mark began to glow brighter, illuminating the room in faint amber pulses. The brass key on the table turned once, though no one touched it. I heard the same 3 knocks that had come from beneath the pedestal. Slow, deliberate. Answered. The sound wasn't coming from below this time. It was coming from the wall behind my desk, the one that had shifted days ago. The plaster began to crack along a perfect spiral. Dust drifted to the floor. A small portion of the wall loosened and fell inward, revealing not brick, not insulation, but smooth, ancient stone, engraved with faint symbols matching those from the lodge floor. The hum deepened. The air grew heavy, charged. And then I heard it, a whisper that wasn't sound but meaning, threading directly into thought. Continue the work. I stepped back, heart pounding. The mark on my hand burned. I could feel something beyond the wall, less patient, enormous, aware. I thought of Brother Lucas's words. The geometry remembers. The realization came cold and absolute. The lodge hadn't initiated me. It had planted me. Whatever the work was building beneath the city, it needed architects on both sides of the stone, and I was now one of them. That night I packed a bag, but when I reached the door, the key wasn't where I'd left it. The table was empty, and then I saw it, already inserted in the lock, waiting. The hum from the wall grew louder, synchronized with my pulse. The geometry wanted movement, continuation, completion. I turned the handle. The hallway outside was gone. Only the same circular room remained. Chalk grooves, pedestal candles, and the faint scent of old stone breathing. But this time, there was no one else inside. Just me, and the work, waiting. There's no door anymore, at least not one that leads back. I've stopped counting the hours. There's no sunrise or clock in this place, only the pulse of light that comes from the floor. Steady, deliberate, alive. The circle is no longer chalk or resin. It's carved into stone, deep and black, the grooves filled with a light that moves like molten gold. When I first arrived, or was taken, I shouted. My voice carried nowhere, swallowed whole by the geometry. Sound here has weight. It falls, not travels. I walked the perimeter until I could no longer pretend it was a room. The curve never ended. It folded. At some unseen threshold, I would pass the same spot again without noticing. The pedestal always at the center, the spiral always faintly breathing beneath my feet. The work, Lucas had said, was alignment. I thought it was metaphor, moral refinement, inner harmony. But here, stripped of illusion, I see the truth. Alignment is assimilation. You don't balance with the geometry. You become its axis. It speaks rarely now, not in words, not in sound, in recognition. Thoughts that aren't mine slide through my skull like light through glass, rearranging meaning as they pass. When it notices I am afraid, it calms the air. When I start to resist, the hum deepens, reminding me I have no rhythm of my own anymore. My pulse obeys it. My breath keeps time with its quiet thunder. I understand now what the work truly builds. It isn't architecture in the world above. It's structure in the unseen, a lattice of will and flesh and memory that holds up what men call reality. We are the mortar. The Freemasons think they preserve secrets. They are the secret's maintenance crew. Each ritual, each degree, each alignment, another brick in a foundation laid not for man's glory but for its continuation. The lodge was never about enlightenment. It was about construction. And I am now a part of its wall. I've seen the others, not with eyes, but with the recognition that hums between connected things. Faces half remembered from meetings, from processions, from whispered oaths. They're here too, folded into the circle like ink in water. Sometimes I glimpse a shape beside me, the outline of Brother Lucas. I think he's further along, deeper in the alignment. His edges shimmer, like light seen through heat. He doesn't speak anymore. But when I think of him, the hum quickens, as though the work approves of my memory. It uses memory, the way we used stone, to reinforce what would otherwise collapse. Each of us offered up everything we were, and in return it gave us permanence, or something that resembles it. I tried once to break the circle. I don't know why. Reflex, defiance, human noise against cosmic silence. I scraped my fingernails against the groove until they split, until blood traced the lines like a new kind of offering. The light pulsed once, sympathetic. Then the pain stopped. The wounds closed. The blood vanished, drawn down into the pattern. The hum resumed its steady rhythm, patient as gravity. I understood. There is no defiance here. The geometry forgives nothing because it needs nothing. I think of the night I first saw them, the brothers in robes, the 7 hinges, the way the candles refused to light too far from the center. I understand now that they weren't performing the ritual. They were maintaining the alignment. They were the scaffolding, not the architects. The true ritual began when the room noticed me. The moment I turned the key, I joined the plan. The door wasn't entry. It was consent. Time folds strangely here. Some moments feel like seconds stretched thin across centuries. Others vanish before they complete. I see flashes of other lodges, hundreds of them, identical in proportion, though different in decor. Beneath each one, the same pattern glows faintly through the earth, connecting them like nerve endings in an organism vast beyond comprehension. The geometry hums to itself across continents. Men think they lead, govern and build, but it is the alignment that dictates where foundations are poured, where spires rise, where nations sleep. And all the while beneath their cities the hum continues, adjusting. Sometimes I am allowed to see the surface again, not as I left it, as it truly is. Every building, every shadow, every measured inch of street aligns with an invisible pattern. Even sunlight bends slightly towards certain coordinates. The work has been ongoing for centuries, maybe longer. The symbols carved into ancient stones, the myths of the builders, the sacred measures, all fragments of a blueprint too immense to comprehend. And now, piece by piece, we are being integrated into its foundation. The more it absorbs, the more stable the illusion above becomes. I am both horrified and honored. The human part of me trembles. The aligned part is proud. Sometimes I remember the key. I can almost feel its shape in my palm, though it's long gone. I used to think it opened the door. Now I know it was the door. A symbolic artifact of entry and erasure. The moment I kept it, I kept the path. And the path kept me. Brother Lucas once said, "The geometry remembers." He was wrong. The geometry never forgets. I hear movement beyond the circle now, slow, massive, deliberate. The thing that all lodges echo, the core beneath every foundation. It shifts, adjusting the symmetry of what remains above. When it moves, walls breathe, oceans flex. Every stone, every ritual, every oath, calibration for that one act of perfection that has not yet happened. It will happen soon. I feel it through the hum, a pulse building like pressure before birth. The work is almost finished. I understand my role now. I was not meant to see the ritual. I was meant to become it. When the final alignment completes, when every lodge and every initiated mind has been folded into the design, there will be no difference between stone and thought, between earth and will. The world will fit its own blueprint perfectly, and the work will be done. Then I think the hum will stop, and in the silence that follows, the builder will return. If this confession reaches anyone, if somehow these words find the light, know that I didn't seek this knowledge. I only turned a key. That's all it takes. A single act of curiosity, a single deviation in the pattern, and the geometry will correct you. So if you ever stand before a locked door in a place where men speak of light and truth and brotherhood, and if the key is offered or left for you by accident, don't turn it. Some doors don't lead forward, they lead beneath.